Hi, everyone. This is Sochina Hosa with the DNC. Welcome to today's call on Trump's first 100 days in his presidency. We also released a report today that everybody should have in their inbox. So I wanted to welcome today Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer, House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi, and DNC Chair Tom Perez, who will deliver remarks on Trump's first 100 days. Leader Schumer?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me thank Leader Pelosi and Chairman Perez for getting on the phone, and thank all of you. This week, as we head towards the 100th day of the Trump presidency, House and Senate Democrats are going to be focusing on the promises that the president made to American workers. Unfortunately for the country, in the first 100 days, so many of these promises have been broken outright or remained unfulfilled. Now, our job in Congress is to help make people's lives better. We want to help middle-class families in this country and those struggling to get into the middle class. And we want to work with an administration to make that a reality. So, if there was a silver lining in the election for Democrats, it was that President Trump ran against both the Democratic and Republican establishments. He talked like a different kind of Republican who was eager to work with Democrats to improve our trade deals for the American worker, to pass a huge infrastructure package that would create millions of jobs, and to favor working-class Americans over special interests. We welcomed this rhetoric and stood ready to work with him to accomplish these goals because we believe that is exactly the way this president and this country could start to truly make a difference and help Americans. Instead, the president has spent the first 100 days governing from the far right on behalf of the special interests, breaking his promise to be a president for the forgotten man and woman, as he called them. The president has broken promises or has yet to fulfill them in areas that matter to so many of his voters and so many Americans. Every day this week, we'll be reminding the American people of those facts. We're going to focus on four main areas: jobs in the economy, health care, draining the swamp, and his budget. He promised to be tough on trade, outsourcing, and jobs. He promised he would label China a currency manipulator and fight back against their rapacious trade policies, something many of us Democrats welcomed with open arms. But he hasn't done either, choosing instead to take it easy on China in hopes they'll be tough on North Korea. He said his policy would be buy American and hire American, but he's refused to insist that pipelines and water structure be made with American steel. If he was serious about outsourcing, he'd demand that Senate Republicans put Senator Baldwin's bill, requiring that infrastructure be made with American steel, on the Senate floor. Tepid public support for a bill with real teeth to help prevent American jobs from being shipped overseas is not enough. He should use his bully pulpit and push for its immediate passage in Congress. Now, he also promised he'd drain the swamp, but instead he's filled his cabinet with billionaires and bankers, given out secret waivers that allow lobbyists to work in his administration on the issues they previously lobbied in. That's not draining the swamp, that's filling it up. And his budget would slash programs like medical research and infrastructure that create good-paying middle-class jobs, cuts both Republicans and Democrats vociferously oppose. So, as we head to the first 100 days, Democrats are going to hold the president accountable for the promises he made to working-class voters. We're going to continue to push him to work with us on the issues he claims to support, that we know will help the working class. But when he goes against our values or sides with special interests at the expense of middle-class people and people trying to get to the middle class, we're going to oppose him with all we've got. Unfortunately, so far, his administration has given neither Democrats in Congress nor middle-class families much to applaud. With that, let me turn it over to Leader Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Leader Schumer. It's an honor to be here with you and with our DNC Chair, Tom Perez. I'm pleased to join you in discussing the first 100 days, and the broken promises that the American people have seen. President Trump's first 100 days have been a disastrous parade of broken promises to working people with handouts to wealthy special interest. Democrats believe we should focus every day on job creation and growing paychecks for everyone, everywhere in our country. But the Republicans have spent the first 100 days trying to weaken working families and to put even more money in the pockets of the wealthy few. I agree with you. We have a responsibility to find common ground, or the President of the United States, where we can. Where we cannot, we must stand our ground, and our hopes of finding that common ground are greatly diminished in his first 100 days. But we are ever optimistic about the future. In terms of his promises, President Trump promised insurance for everybody when it came to health care. Instead, he tried to raise Americans' health costs, deductibles, and premiums, while handing a $600 billion tax break to the very rich and big corporations. Trump Care means higher health costs, 24 million Americans losing health coverage, gutting key protections, a crushing age tax, and stealing from Medicare. And somehow, Republicans keep finding ways to make their health care bill even more costly and more cruel. After the American people overwhelmingly rejected his bill, President Trump is threatening to make health premiums soar even further in the hopes of forcing Americans to swallow the moral monstrosity of Trump Care with the votes in the Congress. For all of his populist promises, the president's budget blueprint mirrors Trump Care's contempt for families. It would slash jobs and job training, ransack infrastructure investments, devastate life-saving medical research, and betray seniors who depend on Meals on Wheels. And by the way, 500,000 veterans depend on food stamps, with all the especially severe impact for rural communities. I am an appropriator, and I know that our appropriators try very hard to work in a bipartisan way, respecting each other's position, finding common ground. And that was on the path that we were on until the president intervened. And his budget is, we believe as appropriators, the budget should be a statement of our national values. What is important to us as a nation should be reflected in our budget. But President Trump is showing that he does not value the future of our children, seniors, and working families in our country with his budget. During the questions, we'll talk about what his wall will cost in terms of economic growth and jobs, what it will cost in clean air, what it will cost in research at the NIH. In the coming week, Democrats in Congress and across the country will lead a daily drumbeat of action, holding the president to account for his 100 days of broken promises to the American people. With that, I'm pleased to yield to the distinguished Democratic National Committee Chair, Tom Perez.
Thank you, Leader Pelosi. Thank you, Leader Schumer. Thank you for your leadership. You've now heard about President Trump's broken promises on everything from health care to the economy. It took literally hours on January 20th for those broken promises to begin. Hours after he took office, he took steps to make it harder for first-time home buyers to buy a home. Trump has passed legislation to let states withhold funding from Planned Parenthood. He has rolled back protections for student loan borrowers and nominated a Secretary of Education with no experience in public education whatsoever. He has delayed implementation of a rule requiring financial advisors to work in the best interests of the retirees that they're advising. His mass deportations have left U.S. children without their parents. Just last week, a mother of 4 citizen children in Ohio was deported, and a dreamer in Los Angeles was deported. We thought he talked about family values. When you drive families apart and you tear families apart, that's inconsistent with our values as a nation. He failed to follow through on another central promise of his campaign, draining the swamp. Not only has he failed to drain the swamp, he's filled it with more alligators. Just look at the billionaire boys club he's assembled in his cabinet. Instead of standing up to Wall Street, he has hired its top executives and begun rolling back regulations meant to protect consumers from the kind of risky banking practices that helped cause the financial crisis. Budgets are indeed moral documents. They reflect the values of the community. This is not, they call it a skinny budget. It's a morally bankrupt budget. We should be building bridges of opportunity, not walls of distrust. And this budget builds nothing but distrust, and this budget reneges on basic promises. Our strength as a nation is also our compassion. We can be strong and compassionate, and in fact, we must be strong and compassionate. The American people have seen this con before, and they aren't falling for it. I've said many times that while January 20th was important, January 21st was far more important, with the women's marches in Washington, across the country, and around the world. That's when millions of people stood up to say, Donald Trump, you do not stand for our values. You did not win the popular vote. Your presidency is something that we will indeed resist at every attempt when you are indeed rolling back the progress that we are making. And the energy hasn't stopped on January 21st. The most remarkable thing about the first 100 days, in my mind, is not so much what Donald Trump is trying to do to America, but it is the resistance that has come forth across this country. Last weekend, Americans took to the streets for tax marches, demanding that Donald Trump come clean about what he's hiding in his tax returns. We saw the March for Science, in which people said that we need to take action to preserve the environment. If we don't have science and we don't have a commitment to science, it is just fiction. We see this activism happening all across the country. And one thing is very clear, the energy is not going away. The energy will not go away. And we will continue to work with people across the country, people, Republicans, Democrats, independents, and others, who believe in America that should work for everyone, who believe that health care is a right, not a privilege, who believe that everyone who works hard and plays by the rules should have an opportunity to realize the American dream. That was what Donald Trump said he was trying to do when he ran for president, and what we have seen throughout the first 100 days is indeed 100 days of broken promises. And that is why we will continue to fight, and we will continue to do what is necessary to ensure that everybody has that opportunity to realize the American dream. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to all our speakers. Now, if you have a question, go ahead and press 1. Again, if you have a question, please press 1 and give us a minute to compile the questions. Great. The first question goes to Jonathan Nicholson.
Hey guys, thanks for doing this. I was just wondering, last week it seemed to be that there was some maneuvering room between Dems being okay with increased money for border security versus necessarily the wall, and specifically for Leader Schumer. Where are you guys at now on this topic in terms of the omnibus or CR at the end of this week? Hello?
Leader Schumer, do you want to take that one?
I'll speak to it. First of all, let us all recognize that we have a responsibility to protect our borders. The fact is that the wall is a dereliction of duty in doing that. It's going to cost tens of billions of dollars. Some of the reporters always say, well, he made a promise in the election. I do not think that the election was a referendum on building a wall to the tune of tens of billions of dollars of opportunity cost for our children's education, for our investments in jobs and economic growth in the future, and for building our own infrastructure of bridges and water systems and the rest in our country. So yes, if we have needs for this technology or the rest to help protect our border, let's see what that is. Our appropriators were well on a path to resolving their differences and finding their common ground, respecting each other's priorities until the White House intervened. So this has now become a rhetorical monstrosity. as much of their health care is and all the rest, where they have inflated. Well, the president made a promise. No, he did not promise that they would take food out of the mouths of babies and seniors and education, clean air, clean water, scientific research off the table in a significant way in order for him to pay for his immoral, ineffective, unwise proposal of a wall. So again, where we have opportunities to protect our border, that is what we will do, north and south. Mr. Schumer, did he was addressing it specifically to you?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I was cut off. I don't know what I missed, if someone asked a question of me or not. I'm back on. I'm on an airplane, so I'm going to have to get off pretty soon. 5 to 10 minutes.
And I'm getting on an airplane pretty soon to go to Los Angeles. So.
Great. So we'll go ahead and take another question from Kelly.
Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for doing this call, guys. This is Kelly Madrick from CQ. I just wanted to ask of Leader Pelosi and Leader Schumer, can you talk a little bit about whether a CR is inevitable at this point for this week? It seems like that's what we're heading towards, given the broad disagreements between the two parties. Thank you.
Okay, let me try that. No, I don't think it's inevitable at all. The four parties were negotiating quite well, Leader Pelosi, myself, Speaker Ryan, and Leader McConnell, until Donald Trump in the White House threw a monkey wrench into this with a wall, which is not only unpopular with Democrats, but with many Republicans who we've heard yesterday, Peter King, Marco Rubio, before that Lindsey Graham, and many others say that it should be debated in regular order. So there can be a discussion, so there can be a plan. We have no plan about his wall. And so we believe that the Republican leaders should tell Donald Trump that we can do this at a later time. I don't think it'll pass. There are so many problems with it. There's the problem of they don't have a plan. There's a problem that he said Mexico would pay for it. That was his promise and not fulfilled. There's a problem of eminent domain, and there's a problem that most Americans, we don't even know how expensive it is. Estimates are up to $70 billion. Would rather see that money used in other ways. And most importantly, the wall's not effective. There are many much more effective ways, much of which we outlined in comprehensive immigration reform to do it. So instead of risking government shutdown by shoving this wall down the Congress's and American people's throats, the president ought to just let us come to an agreement, and we're happy to debate this wall in regular order down the road once he has a plan, which there's no plan now. Just says build it.
From the standpoint of procedure, the only justification for any extension of the continuing resolution is if there was the prospect that we would have the substance of the bill done, and we would just need a few more days to go House and Senate to pass it. But just to kick the can down the road, as the leader was referencing, just to just go over things that we've been over that we can make decisions about, is not the legislative process. And that, I guess, is the point. Legislative branch, Article 1. The president should respect the work of the Congress, especially on appropriations bills, which must originate in the House, working together to send something to the president. So again, the only justification for any extension, which I would hope we wouldn't need, would be just to take it to the floor, but not to
and
continue.
It's my view. Sorry. Just to follow up on what Leader Pelosi said, it's my view that if the president stepped out of it, we could get a budget done by Friday. And I know, Nancy,
that's right. I totally agree.
Because we've talked about it. Yep.
Yeah, well, we were on the path to get it done until he did intervene. So I agree.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much. We have our last question from Eric Don from Bloomberg. Eric? Eric? Okay, it looks like there's a problem with Eric's line. So we'll go ahead and that concludes today's call. Since there are no more questions. If you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to email us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for joining today's call.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.